friends, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to St. Gallen today, to the St. Gallen Gastrointestinal Cancer Conference. It's now the fourth time that we host this conference in St. Gallen, and it has become kind of a tradition for me to start off the conference and to tell you a bit about the city of St. Gallen and the surroundings. So if you come every 2 years, you'll know a lot about St. Gallen. Now we're still waiting for one of the speakers to arrive. So if I tell you more and more about St. Gallen, it's just because I haven't seen him back there yet. Can I have the slides? Can I have more slides, please? Getting there. Could I have this slide big? Yes, thank you. So welcome again. If you look at the scientific program of this meeting, you'll see in this very simplified slide that we have 2 days where the speakers will tell us about the current controversies in gastroesophageal cancer. And on Saturday, we'll have an attempt at a consensus. Now, this poses the general question what controversies are good for, or if they can bear any fruit. And of course, I have to come back to the city of St. Gallen, and I try to show you 2 examples of controversies that bore fruit. Now, the first story starts a long time back. It starts in Ireland, or actually in Wales, where 12 Irish travelers started from Bangor in Wales on a trip through Europe, and they started actually in the year of about 610. They were 12 travelers, and they were heading for Bobbio in Italy, where they actually founded an abbey at the end of their journey. Now, on their way, they picked up a guy called Gallus, and he traveled with them to the Lake of Constance area, and then he got left behind, actually. So he stayed here, and the others traveled on. Now, there's a lot of dispute about the reason why Gallus stayed and didn't go with the others to Italy. And the legend has it that he was ill and he couldn't travel over the Alps to Italy. But historians actually tell us that it has another reason. I don't know how many of you travel with travel groups regularly. From time to time, there's this one person that really gets on your nerve. And from what we hear, Gallus was one of those. And so it was more a controversy between those travelers that led them to leave Gallus behind. And he lived as a hermit in what used to be a primeval forest at this spot. When he died, he had accumulated some followers, and about 100 years after his death, they started to build a simple abbey that grew and grew. And around the abbey, people started to settle, and this was actually the nucleus of the city of St. Gallen. So today you can see what remains of the abbey, surrounded by the medieval city and the newer parts. Now this was one controversy that actually bore fruit, but there was a second important controversy, that was the Protestant Reformation. Now, you've all heard of Calvin and Zwingli as important reformers in Switzerland, but you may not have heard of Joachim von Watt, called Vadianus. He was our own local reformer, Protestant reformer, and you can see his statue if you walk through the city near the marketplace. This grisly-looking guy had success with his attempts to convince the city folk of St. Gallen. So what happened was that the Abbey of St. Gallen, which was Catholic, was surrounded by a city with Protestant inhabitants. So they built a huge wall around the Abbey district to separate Catholics from Protestants. You can still see part of this wall if you walk through the city, actually. It looks like this. Quite a big wall. Now, the Protestant reformers, they thought it was good to remove any religious images from the churches. So actually, they stripped them down to the bare walls, basically. And as a counter-movement to this Protestant iconoclasm, the Catholics started an art form that is known as Baroque, or if it's in architecture, it's called Rococo. So eventually they rebuilt the St. Gallen Cathedral, or the Abbey district, around 755. But since there was this dispute and controversy in religions between the city and the Abbey district, it's interesting to see how they actually built the cathedral. Now, there's usually a standard way how you build Christian churches. This is the famous Church of Notre Dame in Paris, and this is the architectural drawing. Usually, you have the altar of a church facing east and the entrance facing west, and you have a show side. And the show side usually faces west. So this is the western facade of Notre Dame. Not so in St. Gallen. If you look at the St. Gallen Cathedral, the show side is where the altar is. It's facing east, away from the city people. Now, Rococo has brought us another jewel in St. Gallen, which is well worth having a look at. And this is the St. Gallen Library, the Abbey Library. It's built in the Rococo style. And if you have time to spare, for example, after the consensus session on Saturday, if you have 1 or 2 hours, the library will be open till 5 p.m. So it's well worth having a look at. So this is it for today, the St. Gallen story. And now I pass on the microphone to Florian Lordig. Florian.
Thank you very much, from Florian to Florian. And also a warm welcome from my side. So I do this as the current chairman of the EORTC GI Tract Cancer Group. And first of all, I would like to welcome you from the perspective of the EORTC and its GI group. And I would also like to thank the people who helped organizing this joint meeting, in particular, of course, Florian Otto, and also Agnes Klaus, who makes all this possible, and Judith Eberhardt and her team, with who you were in touch. And it's really great that you give us this support. We appreciate this very, very much. And just a few words maybe about EORTC. Also, I see many faces here in the auditorium of colleagues, fellows who are already members of the EORTC GI group. So I do not need to say too much, but maybe for those of you who are not so familiar with the activities of the EORTC, just some numbers, just some words about this very strong network. You know, it is an academically driven European research network with its headquarters in Brussels, in Belgium. But it is acting globally with a focus on Europe, of course, the European Organization of Research and Treatment in Cancers. But actually, and we see this also increasingly in the activities of our group, the network is reaching out to other parts of the world, like East Asia, Australia, Canada, etc. These are just some impressive numbers from the currently available analysis dating back to 2016. The 2017 numbers will come soon, and they will certainly not be worse. You see there are 5,000 collaborators worldwide, 870 institutions involved in 35 countries. ERTC covers 21 working groups, and the GI tract cancer working group is one of these. Many employees at the headquarters who help to settle the study and to do the operational work. And this is just the number of studies that open every year. This gives you just a view on that ERTC is really active in almost every country in Europe, but also from outside of Europe. A good proportion of patients is screened and recruited. We really believe that diversity of our working groups is a source of intelligence and evolution. So we accept influence from all disciplines and from all different systems. I think this is a strength of Europe, that there is some diversity which may lead to better solutions at the end of the day. And I just want to give you some rough ideas where we are focusing on when we are talking about contemporary research on GI tract cancers. Of course, multidisciplinarity is a big issue, and quality in all the disciplines that need to work together. We try to establish good platforms for personalized treatment. Immunotherapy is an increasing issue, as you can imagine, also in GI tract cancer. We have settled a new program for young adults diagnosed with cancer, and we are starting with topics on early onset colon cancer, where we have started with a new task force, but it will probably expand to other GI malignancies. Translational research activities play a major role, and I can assure you that there is no project, no clinical project where we miss to sample blood, tissue, where imaging questions are also involved. We have a mentoring program, which is maybe important for you if you are young or feel young or know young people in your groups. To bring them into the group. We really appreciate that very much, and we do a lot that we take care of the younger ones and that we involve them in the writing of the protocols and in responsibilities they can take there. And of course, cooperation is a key issue. I told you already, we are spreading out to many other European networks, to national groups in France, Netherlands, Germany, but also beyond. We are cooperating a lot with the Japanese colleagues, but also with colleagues from Korea or with networks like eNets. So that's it already. I still would like to make you aware that this event here is very important, but we will also have a very nice other event taking place next year in Prague, 5 to 8 May. We will have the International Gastric Cancer Congress in Prague under the umbrella of the International Gastric Cancer Association, but the ERTC is also involved as a partnering organization. So I invite you already to block this in your calendar, 5 to 8 May 2019 in the beautiful city of Prague. Thank you very much. And so it's my pleasure to hand over to Manfred Lutz.
Thank you, Florian. But before you go to Prague next year, it's worthwhile to stay here. And I'll try to show you why it's an interesting topic which we selected this time. It actually is a repeat of the first conferences, which started in 2012, also with gastric and esophageal cancer. 2 years after, we went to rectal cancer, and 2 years ago, we discussed pancreatic cancer. So this time, you see also that we focus a little bit more here. It was gastric and esophageal. Now we say we would like to treat gastric and junctional adenocarcinoma, and I will like to try to explain you why we selected to focus even a little bit more. Just to set the stage again for the conference so that you know where we are placed. This conference is alternating with the St. Gallen Breast Conference, which has a long tradition. and it has pretty much the same setup that we discussed, 1.5 or 2 days, and then on Saturday try to bring that all together with the faculty, which has been here in a panel session where we vote and discuss a little bit what we can translate into clinical practice. The whole conference is supported by SONC, which is based here in St. Gallen, and which also running the breast conference. What's very important to know is that we skip the metastatic and advanced setting completely, and we try to stick to the curable situation, and mainly there try to focus on the multimodal treatment and incorporate radiotherapists, surgeons, and medical oncologists, and try to kind of set you up for the tumor conference at home so that you have arguments to discuss with your friends. I come back to this. We try to focus, and this is the reason for this is that we went back to the last conference 6 years ago and had a look what we did there and where we stood there, and we saw that at that time we knew that there is a difference between squamous cell carcinoma and light microscopy as compared to gastric adenocarcinoma, and we knew that there is an entity in between, and we tried at this time to first of all define it by location, thought about if Sievert is the right classification. I think this is solved, and even the new 8th version of the TNM classification classifies it according to sort of a scheme which we also developed in part here in St. Gallen. We tried to go a little bit further and ended up with immunohistochemistry, knew that there is a difference in here between different tumor types, but that's pretty much where we ended, and we at the end ended with location to base the therapy on. In the meantime, a lot of things happened, and probably the most important are 2 analyses by a TCGA network which show that there is a clear distinction on the molecular basis between the squamous cell carcinoma and sort of a mix. I say now very broadly because I think you will hear much more about that during the next couple of days, a mix of adenocarcinoma which might be treated differently depending actually still on the size. That's the gastroesophageal junction, that's the stomach, but also on the molecular features. And if you go to the comment, now this is a comment in Nature to the TCGA atlas from surgeons who are based on the head and neck area, and they say that probably we have only 2 entities. One is the head and neck cancer squamous cell, where most esophageal squamous cell carcinomas closely resemble, and then we have the adenocarcinoma, and maybe we can distinguish that quite clearly. I'm not sure that it's that clear, and I think the first session will start with that and try to differentiate a little bit more and see if we are right by focusing the GI conference 2018 on this adenocarcinoma, which is below there, and if we should not have maybe taken in some more squamous cell carcinoma. In the end, for Saturday, to be honest, we try to go back to the clinical practice, and the clinical practice right now is still based on location. There is some molecular features which we need to take in. I think we will learn that today and maybe interpret it on Saturday, but we have on Saturday 4 big blocks to discuss. We will first discuss what's the best approach to gastric cancer. Do we need to incorporate molecular features? How do we best stage that? And we will have an introduction to each of the topics by a specialist in the field to outline the questions which are really open. That will be Dorothea Wagner here. Florian Lordig will introduce the second part, which is the question, if we have already done surgery, we are faced with a completely new situation. Some patients have had neoadjuvant chemotherapy, responded or not. Others did not have any chemotherapy before. So what do we do with these depending on the risk factors and on the state of the patients? And then the third part for Saturday will be introduced by Lizzie Smythe, and she will ask, based on her own work with MAGIC, if cross or FLOT, that's radiochemotherapy or chemotherapy alone, is good in this in this junctional cancer and where we need to set the difference. And we will discuss that. And in the end, we come to a field which is completely new, I think, and very experimental. That's the question, what do we do if the cancer is a little bit more advanced? Either peritoneal carcinomatosis or synchronous or metachronous metastasis. You know, there is a big move to do HIPEC or to do surgery on metastasis, which is completely open and not too much based on real solid randomized evidence. So I think that's a good set of questions to face our experts with on Saturday. And having said that, I think we can easily start with the conference, but before you kind of leave later on, you need to know that we will summarize all that again in a manuscript, which is thought to be planned to be published in the European Journal of Cancer, and the presentations, most of them at least, will be online available within the next couple of days on this page, which is actually very, very accessible and very easy to read. So thank you very much again for coming, and I would like to introduce the first